One of the most fascinating things about BC, and Canada in general, is just how much land there is. To demonstrate this, here is Vancouver, and here is the Lower Mainland. With no traffic, it takes just under an hour to drive from here to here. And here is all of BC. For a little bit more perspective, here's the entirety of the UK to approximate scale. Drive for more than 2 hours in any direction from Vancouver, or take a ferry onto the island, and you are driving through wilderness, backcountry, towering peaks, infinite forests, or limestone deserts. Driving down the 99 from Lillooet to Pavilion, the road is dotted with infrastructure from a bygone era, like this old chimney that stands with nothing else around it. Perhaps it was from the Gold Rush era, or maybe an old ranch. On the coast, even old whaling stations stand looming, with nothing but the concrete skeleton to remind us of the pre-fossil fuel era from which they came. Land is so cheap, people just leave entire towns to fall apart once the area is no longer needed. And yet, small towns motor on. Tiny pockets of community hidden away in secret valleys protected by massive mountains. The citizens of these towns have decided to opt out of the hustle and bustle of 21st century, take the clocks off the walls, and run on what I now call Goldbridge time. They choose to live in the middle of nowhere and do what makes them happy. Rip around on a quad on a frozen lake? Definitely. Go to an old abandoned rock quarry and shoot some guns? Absolutely. Hunker down in your living room with your favorite people while a wood stove keeps you warm and your dog chews on a bone from a deer you harvested ethically weeks before? Why not? Welcome to life in small town BC. Welcome to Goldbridge. Hi, my name's Liam. I live in Vancouver, BC, and I love the outdoors. Lucky for me, BC is packed full of amazing landscapes. From alpine meadows to old-growth forests, from deserts to tundra to wetlands, pretty much every landscape imaginable can be found within its borders. Unfortunately, in the modern era, it's really easy to waste your days away with distractions while so much beauty is right at your doorstep. So join me as I visit small towns, explore forests, conquer peaks, and take advantage of everything my home has to offer. Welcome to No More Wasted Days Adventure Edition. Goldbridge is a pretty neat little community. I call it a community because I don't know if a settlement with 43 permanent residents can be considered a town. It's so off the beaten track that their gas station is just an above-ground tank. When talking about Goldbridge, half of the conversation has to be about the drive there. It's about 6 or 7 hours drive from Vancouver, depending on the time of year and what route you take. As it was winter, I opted to take the Duffy Lake Road. Now, I've driven this road probably about a dozen times, but usually on my motorcycle during the summer. And this was a completely different experience. For the sake of the economy of words, I try not to hyperbolize in my musings, but the drive along the Duffy Lake Road in the winter literally took my breath away. As I meandered through the perspectiveless, snow-coated peaks, I realized my breathing was short and my heart rate was increasing. Several feet of snow piled along the sides of the roads, clear blue skies, and seemingly infinite untouched winter wilderness gave me that sense of novelty that I spend much of my life chasing. I always struggle with putting certain experiences into words, and this one was no exception. By the time I got off the Duffy and into Lillooet, it was dark, so I didn't really get to appreciate Highway 40, the road into Goldbridge. Highway 40 is mostly unpaved, has no lights, and is stressful enough during the day, so I'm pretty happy I changed my headlights the night before. The road is about 100 kilometers and takes 2 hours to drive. This is significant considering the only store in Goldbridge is open 6 days a week for 4 hours a day. To put that in perspective, that's like driving from Vancouver to Pemberton every time you want to buy fresh veggies. That is, if you aren't growing your own. It's also quite a sketchy road, as it is often littered with large rocks falling from the cliff above. In many places, it's only wide enough for one vehicle, with a rock wall on one side and a very steep canyon on the other. Highway Through Hell has a segment on the road, and they have a drone and I don't, so they got some better footage of what the road looks like. All that being said, the drive up to Goldbridge was a little nerve-wracking in the dark. Driving down a long, dark, unpaved road by myself without reception was an experience I've never had before. To be honest, I was a little nervous about it, but that's all the more reason to do it. The silver lining was that, with it being night, I could really concentrate on the road ahead. The drive back was amazing, and it's easy to get lost in the landscape and not focus on the road. I still find the contrast between the small area of light that I could see driving up and the huge views on the way back quite amusing. I was going to Goldbridge to visit my brother, who had moved up there with his girlfriend a few months prior. They live on a pretty big property and have a shop that's bigger than their living space, which is a good thing too, because my brother loves his toys. My first day consisted of me finally getting to ride a snowmobile. As someone who has been riding motorcycles since I learned to drive, I've always felt the need to try the other single-person crafts on snow and water. After practicing on the sled and ATV with his 7-month-old Husky Cross chasing around after us, we headed up some cut blocks and a logging road. As you can tell, I had a pretty good time. Being deep in the woods, surrounded by snowy mountains and several feet of snow was a refreshing break to my 9-to-5 desk job. After playing in the snow up the Forest Service Road, Cole wanted to show me another place that's a little more open to play around. So we took our toys down the road, and of course, this being a small town, when you see somebody out and about, you are obligated to stop and talk. Unfortunately, at this point I accidentally changed a setting on my GoPro, and I couldn't film once we got going again. Since he had to take the snowmobile through the ditch, I got a little bit ahead of him. So I stopped, and waited, and I waited, and I waited. I realized it was taking him a long time to catch up, so I went back to check on him. This is where I realized that I had turned off the filming function on my GoPro. And, well, I don't want to use the term disaster, but it definitely wasn't a good thing. It looked like we had our own mini version of Highway Through Hell on our hands. Since it was early January, it got dark, fast. And the time it took to get back to the property, enlist Caitlin's help, get some gear, make some phone calls, then get back to the sled, it had gotten dark. Luckily, Cole's ATV had a winch. Using some straps, a come-along, and a little bit of ingenuity, we anchored the ATV to a tree on the opposite side of the road. The temperature was dropping fast, I wasn't wearing winter boots, and Caitlin was in sweatpants, so we had to get this done quickly. The first order of business was to flip the sled over. The next order of business was to get it unstuck from some small saplings, which is obviously a job that only a chainsaw can do. From there, it was a slow and steady tug up the embankment and onto the road. After an hour and a half of starting, stopping, backtracking, and rejigging, we finally rescued the sled. And wouldn't you know it, the damn thing started up. The drive back to the property was welcomed graciously by my frozen toes. It was time to make some tea, get cozy, and watch a movie. Day 2 of my time in Goldbridge, I think, really highlighted the small town lifestyle. We were meeting up with some of Cole and Caitlin's friends to do some ice fishing on a frozen lake. We slid out of bed at around 10:30, hung around for a couple hours watching the birds at the bird feeder, then headed out to the lake to bust some holes in the ice. It had been a couple years since the last time I went fishing. It was a nice opportunity to appreciate the quiet and the serenity of the valley and just sit and talk. There were no bites, but there were good people. As it started to get dark, Cole towed his friend behind the ATV on a toboggan, which gave us the idea to return the next day and do some tow boarding. That night, we invited their friend over for a fire and some dinner. We roasted fish, veggies, and pork kebabs. Cole set the jerry can on fire, but that's what small town life is all about. Sitting with friends and family around a fire, eating fish caught from the lake just a few days before, attempting to summon the Lord of the Flame with complete disregard for your own safety, and listening to music. On day 3, we took the snowboards down to the lake with the ATV, set up a tow strap, and had some fun. Towboarding really scratched the itch I had for wakeboarding since I tried it a few years back. It's a difficult sport to get into if you don't know people who are already into it, but towboarding got me 90% of the way there, and it was a blast. Before I left on the last day, we went to shoot some guns. As someone who has only ever shot a .22 pistol a few times, I was excited to get my hands on a rifle. It had been raining and foggy that morning, but by the time we got to the shooting range, the rain had stopped and the fog started to clear, making this my first fully sunny experience of Goldbridge since arriving. Granted, I was in an old rock quarry, so there wasn't a whole lot to see. As for shooting, I can't say much more than my shot was kind of trash. But I had a lot of fun. The drive home really cemented the beauty of the Bridge Valley for me. I've only seen lakes that big in the Kootenays before, backed by massive mountains on a crisp blue background. When the lakes freeze over, you can occasionally see spots of blood in the snow where wolves have made a kill. It's such a rugged landscape, it's not difficult to imagine gold miners heading up by wooden wagon 100 years ago, looking to strike it rich. What's strange to me is how few people actually live out there. You would think with over $100 million of gold mined from the earth since the 1930s, there would be more people inhabiting that place. Trips like these really solidify my perception of the size of my backyard, not just in acreage but also in scale. The fact that just a few hours of driving can put me in such a secluded place of such substantial variation in terrain reminds me of how lucky I am to live where I do. Out there are no scale bars or humans for reference. Size and distance become incomprehensible, and it's easy to point and say, it's just a mountain. The truth is, most people in the world live life on relatively flat land, where trees bigger than 20 feet boggle the mind. African deserts, the Australian outback, the Eurasian steppe, and most of North America are all quite flat. They are all beautiful for their own reasons, but very few places have the variation of BC. I have a friend that has spent much of his young adult life traveling the world solo. I asked him, with everything you have seen, all the landscapes, from the Himalayas of India to the rainforests of South America, what is the most memorable place? Somewhere that you could never get bored of. To which he responded, there is a reason I keep coming home. And, I suppose, for me, it's the same reason I've never left.
My toes are so cold. Holy crap.